Clearly, he's pretending to take umbrage to the statement I made that since this government took office, all we've seen has been a culture of wastage, corruption, and in some cases, plain stealing. I can understand why he's uncomfortable with that, because the truth sometimes can be very inconveniencing. But Doc, I am not the one saying that some appointees of this government, some actors in this government have engaged in plain stealing. The facts are there for everybody to see. Stealing is an English word. If Dr. Koboy doesn't understand, he should check his dictionary. Stealing is stealing. If you take public funds meant for public use, for the benefit of the public, and you misappropriate it, leading to a loss, you misappropriate it to benefit yourself, it is stealing. A typical example is when the Auditor General tells you that the government introduced risk allowances for frontline health workers who were helping the nation to combat COVID-19. That those allowances were meant for frontline health workers. And then you have workers at the Ministry of Information who are not entitled to these allowances, pay themselves these allowances. What is it? You have appropriated to yourself money, state funds, which don't belong to you. When the Auditor General tells you that as a result of COVID, the Ministry of Education awarded a contract to a company called Modern Securities Limited to conduct public education on COVID-19 safety protocols in our secondary schools at a cost of 1.4 million Ghana cedis. That is some 14 billion OCDs. And the Auditor General tells us that this money has been paid to the company by ministers of state and that no evidence of any public education whatsoever was done. What is that? Look, what is that? If you have the Auditor General tell you that we use COVID funds, money meant to save lives, to buy medical equipment for health institutions which were helping us combat this pandemic. He said the medical equipment equivalent to thousands of dollars were received at the central medical stores and dispatched to various health facilities, but never got there. What is that? What is that? Plain stealing. So you people should stop this emotional blackmail and all that. When before Atayi was convicted, was he not a thief? Before Atayi was convicted, he was not a thief because he had not been convicted. Do you know the number of armed robbers who are walking the streets of Accra as free men because they have not been arrested? Some are even on the wanted list of the police. They have not been arrested. So Okoboy's logic, they are not thieves until we arrest them and we send them to court and we convict them. We are not talking about legal prosecution here. That's not what we are talking about here. We are not talking about people who are standing trial, who have the right to be presumed innocent. We are talking about people against whom there is clear-cut evidence that they have misappropriated state funds. This Auditor General's report gives all these people a fair hearing. They are giving queries. They are giving a hearing. Since this report was published, have you heard any of them produce any contrary evidence to the findings of the Auditor General? Those are the things we are talking about here. And if you have love for this country, you will not sit here and try and downplay these things. Because what we must learn to call a spade and not a digging tool, particularly when it relates to the misappropriation and misapplication of state funds. And you must be bold to look some of your colleagues in the face and tell them what you are doing is clear misappropriation, clear stealing. Stop, because one day you will find yourself in trouble. This SkyTrain money that you people have paid, Honorable Jogate himself has washed his hands off it, like Pontius Pilate. He says it was totally unjustifiable because there was no effective agreement. No, and that way the money had to be paid.
Let's just clarify something. People had fingered him as Railways Minister because the Railways Ministry signed an MOU and some contracts with this group from South Africa or something. Now, what he says is that 2 million was money paid by GIF. the Infrastructure Investment Fund, and they say that they bought shares. In fact, that's what the Auditor General report says. Yeah. Now, GIF is under finance, not Railway Ministry. And so he had absolutely nothing to do with that particular transaction. But so if you want to find out about the 2 million, nowhere to go.
Yeah. And he then makes the point that at the signing of the concession agreement, he indicated on public record that even though the agreement was being signed, it will only be effective after it received cabinet approval, parliamentary approval, and after they complied with all those conditions, including the public. These things have not been done.
So I'm saying that yesterday or 2 days ago, I raised that issue. That is up to the GIIF and its board and supervising ministry to tell us why they would buy shares and pay $2 million in a company that the Auditor General says didn't even have a certificate,
a license,
and who the records show that even the consummation of the project were conditional. That there were some things that had to be met. So they would have to explain to us, how come they decided that $2 million must go to a company under all these circumstances
without parliamentary approval and the necessary approvals and all that. And it's like what the Supreme Court said in the case of Woyome, Isophoton, Waterville and all that. Not that somebody squandered money, but in spending state funds, there are rules. The only institution mandated to approve or authorize expenditure of state funds is the Parliament of Ghana. GMPC today cannot wake up and say they are going to buy shares in any company without Parliament approving. And GIF can't do that. GIF, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, is a company wholly owned by the government of Ghana. It's a state company. Okay? Subject to the laws of this country, the Public Financial Management Act, the Public Procurement Act, and so on and so forth, the 1992 Constitution. What they even engage in with that company clearly falls under the definition of an international business transaction contemplated under Article 181, Clause 5 of the 1992 Constitution. You had no approval for that. How can you spend state funds on that? And today, the Minister for Railways say the project cannot be implemented in the foreseeable future. So how do we get our money back? These are some of the things we are talking about. If you look at the same Auditor General's report on COVID-19, he tells us how 11.9 million cedis was spent on food supplies during the 3 weeks of partial lockdown. And yet, the supervisory ministry, the Ministry of Gender and Social Protection, could not produce receipts to support the expenditure. They only produce ANA certificates. They say a paper, they are also no receipt. And the Auditor General argues that the companies they bought the food from, they claim to have bought the food from, are all companies who are registered by the GRA. They have receipts. So how come you don't have receipts for the food you claim to have bought from them and you have ANA certificates? He goes on to say that they bought or they paid for other food supplies. Let me put it that way. They paid for other food supplies, totaling 5.6 million cedis. Oyome's money was 51. This one, about 10% of that, 5.6. 56 billion. And they neither had receipts nor ANA certificates. So they just said we paid for food, nothing to show for. If Ghana was your property or your company, Dr. Koboy, is this how you will allow your company officials to spend the company's money? When President Akufo-Addo, then candidate Akufo-Addo in 2016, was calling Mahama names, calling him a thief, that he had spent $10 million in printing presidential diaries without any evidence, not backed by any Auditor General's report, like I have demonstrated. When he was saying that President Mahama had padded the cost of the Ridge Hospital project, the Kaswa Interchange project, the Kumasi Airport expansion project, without a scintilla of evidence, without citing any official reports like I'm doing here. Are you saying you know law than Akufo-Addo? This law you are postulating here, President Akufo-Addo didn't know. He didn't know. Let's stop the hypocrisy. Now let's come to his Jachi Kwesin analogy relative to COVID-19. Oh, you say he's an authority on constitutional law. Well, he's paid his dues when it comes to legal practice in Ghana, and I respect him for that.
This matter, you prefer to follow him.
That is the position where state institutions mandated to investigate utilization of public funds come up with incontrovertible evidence that shows that public officers that we have entrusted state funds to have abused these funds. They have misappropriated these funds. You don't tell me that I should wait for the people to be arrested, prosecuted, jailed. They should do cross-examination and re-examination before we call. What about if they never get arrested and prosecuted? So let's move on. Now, Dr. Koboy says that it is the mark of every good leader to give hope to his people, give them an assurance that things will get better. And even cites, who did you cite?
I didn't tell you.
Is it Winston Churchill?
Churchill.
Okay. It's not Margaret Thatcher. Okay. Or Margaret Thatcher. He cited somebody like that, I've forgotten. And said, we need to give hope. But Doc, you can give hope based on something and you can give hope based on nothing. The two are not the same. I'm not saying we shouldn't give Ghanaians hope. I'm saying that give them hope based on concrete actions you are taking. Don't give them hope based on mere words. They will not eat that hope. That hope will not materialize. It will not lead to anything. You gave us hope that you were going to rationalize government expenditure and cut down on government expenditure drastically. You said you were cutting down fuel coupons to government appointees, foreign travels, you were not going to purchase new vehicles and all that. In the IMF documents, on the program they give us, they are emphatic that these so-called expenditure cuts never materialize. They are emphatic. Mm-hmm. So it's not about giving hope. It's about backing your words with the necessary action. And that is where you are always found, wanted. If you want to be a motivational speaker, fine. We come and buy airtime here and come and deliver motivational speeches. But in political discussions like this, when we are talking about the plight of suffering masses, how the livelihoods of Ghanaians are worsening by the day as a result of your own actions, your recklessness, and the bad policy choices of your government, don't come and give hope based on nothing. As we speak, Ghana's inflation rates for June this year stands at 42.5%. And is the third highest, is the highest in the whole of West Africa. Highest in the whole of West Africa. And the third highest in the whole of Africa out of the 54 countries in Africa. So how come that in the whole of West Africa, all these other 15 countries in West Africa have also been affected by the war and the pandemic? How come that the rate of inflation in Ghana is higher than what pertains in all these countries? Despite we boasting of planting for food and jobs and all that. Mm. The only factor which is not present in the other countries is that those countries are being governed by relatively good leaders who care about their nation and who are prudent and judicious in the way they spend state funds. Unlike the reckless leaders we have here, led by the economic management team chairman Alhaji Bawumia, President Akufo-Addo, Ken Ofori-Atta, and so on, who have engaged in the most obscene levels of wastage, profligacy, misplaced priority expenditures in the last 7.5 years, which is what has plunged us into the economic mess. Right. That is a fact you must accept. No, just 30 seconds. The definition of inflation is the same all across the world. It is the average rate of increase in general price levels of goods and services. There are 54 countries in Africa. As I speak, Seychelles has an inflation rate of negative 1.3%. Burkina Faso, negative 0.7%. Burkina, our neighbor. Niger, 0.27%. Djibouti, 0.6%. Libya, 2.5%. Mali, 3%. Cape Verde, 3.5%. Tanzania, 3.6%. Benin, 4.3%. Botswana, 4.6%. Gabon, 4.6%. Almighty Ivory Coast, 4.8%. Uganda, 4.9%. Equatorial Guinea, 5%. Namibia, 5.2%. Central African Republic, 5.3%. South Africa, 5.4%. South Sudan, 5.6%. Next door neighbor Togo, 5.8% inflation rate. Swaziland, 6%. Liberia, 6.1%. Somalia, 6.6%. Mozambique, 6.8%. Lesotho, 6.9%. Morocco, 7.1%. Mauritania, 9.4%. Zambia, 9.8%. Comoros, 20.2%. Ghana, 42.5%. And I've left many African countries out. All these countries were affected by COVID-19. They were affected by the Russian-Ukraine war.
Right.
They are standing. Some of them are struggling. But we are not just standing. We are not struggling.
Okay.
We are in a state of comatose. Because even before these external factors struck us, our government, headed by Bawumia, the chairman of the economic management team, were spending state resources recklessly, borrowing recklessly.
All right. Okay.
And that is the bane of this country. That is where we are.